This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 549, recorded on October 12th or the 13th, 2022. Here at Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a chilly. It's getting a little colder. Fall is on its way, Bellevue, Nebraska. And, of course, we post the show with some world-class show notes each week out at the AverageGuy.tv. Big thanks to Jay Franzi, who joined me last week. And, Jay, it was a great conversation to have with him. And if you missed the pre and the post show, you can join us on Patreon for those. Head out to the averageguy.tv/Patreon. We got a $5 plan. Jump in on that, and I'll send you an email every time we post those. And you can get access to the pre and the post shows there as well. The averageguy.tv/Patreon if you want to join us there. Edward Weniger is my host, as my guest. I don't know where I'm going tonight, Edward, but welcome back to Home Gadget Geeks.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. It's been a while. I think maybe most of the pandemic we missed with you. I'm not sure why. It took us a while to even get this one scheduled, but the schedule's lined up. Of course, Edward is a president out there at Alpha Bitcoin, and I think your first visit was 2015, and I think I've on record as saying if I would have listened to your advice in 2015, I would have made about $400,000 on Bitcoin, and I didn't. So I'm sorry, but thanks for the great advice. I wish I would listen. Maybe there'll be some things to listen to tonight. Edward, catch us up a little bit. What's going on at Alpha Bitcoin and what's going on with you?
So yeah, we've been traveling around the country putting on Bitcoin Day events. So we have Bitcoin Focus. I don't know how much last time you and I, and we can delve into it a little bit again here, but just talking about kind of moving away from a lot of the other coins and focusing on Bitcoin. And so the events focused on Bitcoin. And so we went to Nashville, Sacramento, Oklahoma City, Denver. So we had these little kind of mini conferences at each of those places. And then ramping up our mining. Kiosks have been pretty stagnant, just kind of sit there and do their thing. But mining has been really a lot of what I've been spending my time on. So that's been exciting. So.
Yeah, and I would have thought how with let's dive right in on the mining side really quick here. So with Ethereum going from proof of work to proof of stake and all that, what seemed like it took 1,000 years for them to get done. Did that really change the mining world? You'd see it probably better than anybody. That changed the mining world much for you?
So it's it's funny because we could spend quite a bit of time this evening even talking about some of the more like privacy, like censorship, that kind of thing. And so my position would be that Ethereum, all those are not censorship resistant, right? Like that's pretty. There's some interesting proof or perspectives on why that is. But so proof of work, focusing on Bitcoin, and there are other proof of work coins obviously out there, but focusing on Bitcoin is actually quite freeing because you don't have to deal with all the drama of all the other whatever people whining and contention and all the other stuff out there about all the other coins. And so the merge, my opinion is bad thing. Like proof of work is better than proof of stake. Hopefully it crashes and burns. I don't know. I don't know.
Tell us how you really feel about that.
I don't know what'll happen with it, but I have not been, other than the fact that it happened. It's not like I've been like waiting, with bated breath to.
So that from a mining perspective, that didn't change much for you, because I know that for some miners who were mining Ethereum, you weren't doing that before. Maybe is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, we had not been mining Ethereum, and we dabbled in it briefly, but no, everything we're doing now is all mining Bitcoin with ASICs.
Is all mining Bitcoin. How's from a power perspective? There's been a lot of talk in the news about power and power consumption. Of course, here in the Midwest, we have pretty good power rates. There's places that are cheaper, but not too many. How is that working for you now?
So at home, you're going to get, we could talk about home mining a lot, but at home, you're going to get, it's probably not going to be profitable for you. the advantage when you start talking about that kind of stuff is more on the privacy and security side of like if you can mine coins and not have any AML KYC, right? Like they're your coins, you put them in a hardware wallet, they've never touched anything else. Then you have them stored away when the IRS starts knocking, and you can claim I don't have any Bitcoin, right? Because there's no real traceability there.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you could probably get into some arguments about IP addresses and stuff like that, but if you've got one miner at home, the IRS probably will not care that much about that. But so yeah, that's the advantage for a home miner would be mainly just having coins that are untraceable. The on the hosting and enterprise side, in Nebraska, we typically see that 7 or 8 cents, which is right on the cusp of profitability. It's you can make money, but it's hard. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, would it be break even at least with that, or is it still
No,
you're
I think
kind of
you make barely anything.
okay?
In my mind, I could be way off in this.
Yeah.
I probably
Yeah.
should find some facts. In my mind, like six
Yeah.
cents is like where you're
Okay.
or I take that back, sorry. Eight yeah, 6 cents is where you want to be. 8 cents is pushing the limits of profitability, and then like 9 cents you're probably not making any money.
Here in Nebraska with commercial rates, can you get it to the 6 or 7 if you
No,
do it right?
yeah,
Okay.
that's the
Okay.
problem.
Yeah.
You can't in
Yeah.
Nebraska.
Yeah. Are there other spots in the country where or here in the United States where you can, or is it pretty much 10 or above almost everywhere?
So besides doing our own mining, an interesting outcome of Bitcoin Day was that we made a lot of connections in the energy sector.
Hmm.
And you can, and we actually have been working on some of those deals of kind of a finder's fee type arrangement where we have a lot of people that are posting or we are listing a lot of energy opportunities out there, and so we can get people down. Obviously, the more you're looking for, and the more you're willing to spend, right? So if you're looking for 10 megawatts, it's easy to find sub 5 cents.
Hmm.
But if it's getting so you can, but yeah, so you can get
Yeah.
under 5 cents still. But for a smaller miner, somebody wants to, we're still talking about like $1 million buy-in, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
somebody wants to get into it and doesn't only has $1 million, you can still get
Sitting around.
there are a few opportunities out there. You can still get 5 cents pretty easy.
Yeah. It's been interesting as over the last couple years, there was a lot of folks mining, and now I don't know if I know anybody anymore that's kind of
Yeah.
doing it. So I think it's gone into bigger, into bigger environments. There's more money involved in it. I think, like you're talking about brokering the energy. I know Texas a while ago deregulated and went on this kind of a kind of free market system or bidding system for energy. Does that market didn't work so well when the state froze, but
Right.
normally the other 363 days out of the year, does that have any advantage in that state?
I know that I mean, yes, you can make the argument that free markets drive prices down. I don't know if much of the flack they got after the storm was just kind of a, hey guys, you've got to put some controls in there or something like that. But I know prices have since then. My understanding is prices haven't gone up, but it's not as cheap as it used to be. It wasn't because it's not just a free for all like it was. But so yeah, I mean, the deregulation in Texas, yeah, like you said, came back to bite them. It was really nice while it lasted, and then the storm hit, and the other piece of it is kind of the on grid and off grid side of things. That if you can, you've got since we last met, right? There probably were only a few, if any, public mining companies out there. And so, to your point about the big guys are doing it more than the smaller guys nowadays. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of public companies out there mining now. Companies that have gone public since then, but they're with the price going down, their future is in peril too. That
Mhm,
because they have
mhm.
even the huge operations and over leveraged on debt or whatever, they have issues that they need to figure out before they So I think there's gonna be a lot of consolidation in that space. So
We've seen Bitcoin drop into the 20s and it held there for a while. It's bounced around 18 and 19. 19 and a half right now. Do you think, you know, do you think that's a healthy price for it? And does it? I was reading a Bloomberg article today in preparation for this, saying that it's lost some of its volatility, and that's actually a problem. So, two questions in there. One, are we in a good spot with it? Just from 19,000 seems like a pretty good price, right? From just from that standpoint. And then two, is it losing a little bit of its luster and volatility?
I think we touched on this a little bit last time. Is that there still has not been at a macro level more so than at a in a short term level, but you haven't obviously the price over the past 9 years, 10 years has gone up, faster than the market as a whole. But I think you're right in terms of like there's only so many incremental, that it went from 0 to 19,000, whereas the rest of the market was going from whatever 20 to $30,000 or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and so so at a macro level and from that perspective, it does have a decoupling effect compared to the market. I think that will continue, but I think for the time being, and we could talk about the happening and stuff, but for the time being, I think it has almost, it's like it's recoupled, right? So the perspective or the way that some people smarter than me that I follow look at it is just in the 4 year cycles, right? And so there's almost this kind of like, which is also which does correspond to the happening, whether on purpose or it's just a natural free market thing. But there's this 4 years, and then there's kind of a decoupling, and then there's another 4 years of like sticking to the market. So you see Ukraine news, and it goes with the market, stuff like that. So that's kind of how I think of it. Is that happening comes again, all the normal happening market dynamics happen. Part of those dark market dynamics are that the price goes up, and then we're going to be back where we were. We're sitting at whatever $80,000 Bitcoin is just going to sit there at $80,000 for however many years. So that's how I perceive it.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you kind of a question around this as I've watched it over the last couple of years. I appreciated the fact that it didn't always ride straight with the U.S. markets, and then lately over the last year,
Uh-huh.
it just seems to be following them. I'm seeing more and more news articles that mention Bitcoin and the interest rates in the same sentence, and you're like, okay, so tell me what the federal government raising interest rates has to do with the price of Bitcoin, and I'm not sure. I mean, I know they want to put both in the same sentence because it's good clickbait, but
Mhm.
is there a tie somehow, but between interest rates because maybe it's harder to borrow money to invest in it? Is that what they're thinking, or are they just making this stuff up?
It was probably in highest relief when we were when the Fed was printing money or the government was printing money, right? Because that's when the price was going up, and part of that was because people were just spending their $12,000 checks or
Yeah.
whatever, however much money they
Right.
were making on. So the same concept applies of like when the Fed is giving out money, you've got extra money laying around, right? Well, when interest rates are
Right.
going up, potentially you're gonna not do whatever you would do, refinance your house, whatever the thing is, right?
Mhm.
You're gonna act a certain way based on that. So I think that the um, yeah, I think the government choices or the government policies do have an impact on it. Um, in a logical relation to just how people spend money in the investment space.
Yeah.
So people are going to tighten their belts when we're about to go into a recession or when we're in a recession already, and so they're not going to be buying Bitcoin because that doesn't really help them in the short term. So
Yeah, I think they mentioned in the same article the amount being traded each day is about half of what it was during its peak, from whenever that was, and so I guess that kind of makes sense when you think about that way. You mentioned a couple times halving, right? There's that moment, right, with Bitcoin where the miners don't. It literally cuts in half, right? Can you talk a
yep.
little bit about that? When is that, and why should we watch out for it or
Yeah,
look?
so the the other piece of that, which if we're going to talk about home mining, um, that the time to get into home mining now is a great time to get into it. Reason being, uh, that ASICs, the equipment is really cheap because nobody wants it. It's not, it's break even maybe or not profitable. There's an abundance of it in the market. So high supply, lower demand. So you can get cheap ASICs. So what's going to happen is in March or 2024, April 2024, whatever, whenever the halving happens, um, if the price acts like I hope it does, or acts like it has historically, the price of Bitcoin goes up around that time, and then all the prices of ASICs, because they can charge you more, all the prices of ASICs go up. So if you are you're going to see the price spike or see the price start rising again, and you're going to say, oh, I should start doing this. At that point, you're going to be, you're going to have to put out more money to get into the space. But the halving is basically when Satoshi Nakamoto wrote the code for Bitcoin, 10, whatever I said, 2009. Part of that is for multiple reasons. The biggest one is just like, well, so there's the long tail, so that not everybody can just get all the Bitcoin and then it doesn't ever get into other people's hands. So there's kind of this distribution. It's a distribution mechanism, and it's also a way to curtail the supply, so that there's only 21 million, and he had to figure out how to make it 21 million only over a period of 150 years. And so every 4 years roughly, the amount of Bitcoin that you get as a reward for mining literally gets cut in half. So 12.5 becomes 6.25, and then 3.1, whatever that is. And so in a couple of years here, the amount of Bitcoin that the miners receive as a reward for guessing the answers to the algorithm gets cut in half. And so the theory is, or a reaction to that is, people stop selling, miners in particular, stop selling it at a set price that because now they're making less Bitcoin, so they have to cover their costs. So they sell Bitcoin more expensively, and when they sell Bitcoin more expensively, the rest of the market now can't get it cheaper. They have to pay more. So then the whole market kind of rises along with that. So that's kind of how the halvening works. Yeah.
And you're saying, and that there's no set time on it. It's basically when you get to a block, right? That happens at a block, certain block.
You're gonna. I just drew a blank. It is based on. So the blocks are solved every 10 minutes, and I want to say, which is not related to what I'm drawing a blank now, but I believe it is a set block. Yes,
Yeah.
whatever
So it'll be around a time, and I think you're saying, like you said, April 2024. Is that?
I think so. Yeah.
Around that time. We
Yeah.
won't hold you to that, but around that
So yeah,
time.
that's the reason. So yeah, so what happens is, because like right now we're about to go into a period of, we were mining hash, the difficulty is going up because blocks are being solved faster. So I'm just going to use rough numbers, but blocks are being solved. Hash power has gone up, meaning more miners are coming online. So there's more hashing power in the world, more miners running in the world, which, you could take that maybe as a bullish sign. But so then what happens is, now the math, there's more computational power to attack the math. So the math gets solved in 9 minutes. And so the code self adjusts. So now the code is going to say, well, I need to get more difficult. So now I'm going to be more difficult, so that gets us back to that 10-minute block time is what the goal is. So that's what's going on in the immediate, is that we're about to hit a huge difficulty increase, or we did just hit a huge difficulty increase, I think. And so, but after so many of those 10-minute increments go on, eventually the halvening happens at a certain
and
point.
it's not exactly 10 minutes. It can be a little quicker,
Correct.
a little slower, kind of based on
Correct.
that. And so
Yes.
they can kind of calculate it out in time. John was asking in the chat room. So he says, so what would your approach be to getting into crypto to the market now? Let me respond to that question with this question. You just mentioned a second ago, hey, it may be a good strategy. ASICs are cheap right now, or cheaper than they've been. And yet, are we at a point with ASICs, right? ASICs is specialized hardware that's designed just to mine Bitcoin. And it
Yep.
sometimes with other coins, it can do a variety of coins. It's based on a, what do they call that? The algorithm.
Yep.
There's a word for that, isn't there? I'm forgetting my Bitcoin terminology. But anyways, so would there be new ASIC equipment on the horizon that may be better and faster that would come out a year from now, that might, if you bought ASIC equipment cheap today, that might make that equipment obsolete or not as good?
So it is pretty. So we're currently in ASIC world. Bitmain is the big dog. There's two other major competitors, What's Miner and Canaan. Arguably, but what's Miner and Bitmain are the big ones. So obviously we had the S9, that was one of their main models that was out for years and years. We went to the S15, was kind of the next big one, but it didn't last very long. It wasn't a great performer. S17 was again kind of dud, and now we're at S19s. So S19s have been strong and steady and stable. They will What has been happening recently has been iterating um, within the S19. So they've got like the S19 XP, they've got the S19 Pro, S19 Hydro. So I would equate it to like if you're in graphics card world, right? Of like whatever GT 4000, then you have GT 4070 and stuff like that. So like that's kind of where we're at as far as incrementally.
Yeah.
So nothing major. The other part of that though is Intel just broke ground on their fabrication facility in Ohio, and
Ohio.
so something like something like them getting in, they might have some tricks up their sleeve, and that could be some game changing technology. But but right now we're kind of in that S19 phase and just kind of sitting there until somebody comes out with something really monumental. So yeah.
So one strategy could be right now, ASIC miners, the hardware might be at a value, be able to pick up that, and if you can find cheap power, maybe do some mining with it on your own. Even if you're breaking even, with the idea of reselling that in a future time when ASICs may be in more demand. Is it as simple as buy low, sell high on equipment?
So I'll give you. Uh, so you're likely. My opinion is you're more likely to appreciate on hardware than you are to depreciate.
Okay. Okay.
That being said, you have the risk or the downside of equipment breaking and stuff like that. So you have a little bit of a risk of loss on that side of things. Now is probably so. I would you Yeah. So if you bought now, say you bought equipment now to mine Bitcoin at 11 cents at your house, and I'm not logged into the chat, so I sent you a link here you can look at. But so say uh, you're bought at 11 cents. Say Bitcoin goes back up to 60 or goes to 80 or something like that. You're mining profitably there now. So if you're going to dollar cost average, wanted to do it privately, you could buy mining equipment now, sit on it or mine at a loss and just put it in your garage for a little while, and then you wind up with then you can start mining profitably on your 11 cents electricity potentially in whenever you decide to, whenever the Bitcoin price goes up. So
And this is, I'm looking at a ASIC miner right now on screen. Is that
no,
what
this
you're?
is so inside of that box is an ASIC miner.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this is a cool gadget, whatever, the cool little product that you can mine at home. The ability here is that because of the noise and the heat that runs hot and runs loud, um, you put this, basically it's weatherproof, so you
Hmm.
can put this outside, and all you got to do is run a power cord and put some Wi-Fi in there, and
Nice.
you could run some miners in your backyard without doing a whole lot of construction or anything like that.
And both, you could do that in a Nebraska summer and a winter, or just would you only do it in the winter?
I would put it in the shade in the summer. I mean, you could hypothetically, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, 100 degrees. To be honest with you, that is a good question, and I don't know what happens in 100 degrees in one of those boxes. That is
Hmm.
true.
maybe just go down about 6 feet and put it in a hole, right? It stays relatively the same temperature, not too far down. Um, okay, so when we've had you on a long time ago, like 7 years ago now, you encouraged me to dollar cost average into
Yes.
Bitcoin at the time. That would have been if I just would have put 25 or $50 a month in for a year today, because I think Bitcoin was at $264. Not that I remember that exactly, because I've went back and looked and listened to that episode several times and cried at the end. Um, you encouraged me to dollar cost average in. Would you give similar advice today? Especially we're hovering around 19,000 for it. It's definitely down from where it's been. Is dollar cost averaging in still a pretty safe play if folks wanted to get into this still?
Yeah, I would. I mean, you could. So, well, there's two parts to his question, though. Is one dollar cost averaging, and then what to buy. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
so
That's the finished. That's John's question, but I have
yeah,
to. So
yeah. So the dollar cost averaging piece, I think we could still see, like we just talked about, where it's kind of because we're in between happenings. That's just my thesis that it's this kind of really tied to the markets and the news that you're hearing. I think we could go lower, follow the recession down. So by 19, knowing that if you're ever going to sell, that you're going to be a ways out potentially from selling. If you really want to time another dip, you could set your sights on like $12,000 and buy at 12 and sell next time it hits 19. That would be, but you might not ever get your orders filled at $12,000. Who knows?
yeah.
So yeah, so then you wind up with a dollar cost average where you're at like 19, 15, 12, something like that. Swan. So there's an app called Swan Bitcoin. Is a really simple app to do what I just said. I would not recommend Coinbase and those guys. If you're going to do things manually, you could use any exchange really. You could use Kraken, Binance, all those, but then you just have to set your orders manually. If you want to do it automatically, then use something like Swan. But those are not, there's going back to this again. My perspective and the Mad Max like SHTF like is different than other people's. I get that. So if you're okay with some of the AML, KYC, and custodial pieces of what I'm proposing, then that's the easiest way to do it is use something like that. If you are concerned about the privacy side, then yeah, something like mining is the way to do it. And I mean, essentially with mining, you are DCAing, right? Like you're every day you're generating a little Bitcoin, whatever the price is, and you put it into a hardware wallet, and it's yours for sure, versus some of these other options that are somewhat custodial or very custodial.
And the very custodial would be like a Coinbase right now
Yeah,
that has
right.
kind of moved to. I've had some folks. I'm still on Coinbase. I haven't moved yet, not for any particular reason. Just I haven't done it. I haven't done anything different. But I've had some folks kind of say, I'd kind of move away from that
Yeah.
at this point. As you look at and they're probably one of the larger players here in the U.S., right? As far as being a provider for that, is the concern on Coinbase primarily custodial, or is it stability and longevity in the space? Being around for a while, so to speak.
I think you're doubly putting yourself at risk if you're doing custodial with a public company because you're subject to market forces that are if it's a private company, that would make me feel a little better. But now you have all sorts of the stockholder concerns and the board making decisions and stuff like that. I mean, so I think I think there's the like size. Just Coinbase is too big. There's the public side of it. They're a public company, and so they have other concerns of demands on them. And then it's just the fact that they're holding your coins, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's who knows what sort of leverage, or I mean, they go through audits and all that, but still, yeah, the whole concept.
In the United States, taxes have become a real thing on
Yes.
on from when we talked about it in 2015, starting 2015, 2016. It was still a little,
Yeah.
the U.S. federal government didn't really know what to do. They kind of said, like we say in the state of Nebraska, we're supposed to pay sales tax on things we've bought online and report that. And I can't imagine there's a single person in the state of Nebraska that actually fills that part in, right, in their
Yeah.
returns. But in the last 2 years, at least, it's gotten to be a real thing. In fact, I made enough that I ended up paying a good chunk of it back in taxes, and part of the process. I kind of know that's coming. Where do you think the future of that is, and what do you know from a what the federal government is thinking about? What are you seeing in the future? Because it's a pretty high tax rate here in the U.S., right?
I think yes, to answer your question, it is. I think that uh, I, I don't think it's too. Of course, I don't do my taxes. My accountant does, but like, I
Yeah.
don't think it's too burdensome to. I mean, I, I take it back. If you're buying a candy bar with your Bitcoin, right? That, is that a sale, right? Like, so you still have that whole.
Yeah. Yeah.
They haven't necessarily addressed that, which would be nice.
Yes,
Um,
it would
but
be.
if you're selling your Bitcoin, capital gains, that's pretty cut and dry. There's a spot in the form to fill out when it comes tax season. So I don't think that's a huge deal. I think the problem is just where those that is if you're doing anything besides keeping your coins on exchange where you're getting a report at the end of the year, that is a challenge. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I think there's probably a lot of, and they realize it. That's why they just hired 87,000 IRS agents. There's a lot of taxes that don't get reported from that regard because they're used differently than just a regular buying
Yeah.
and selling on a market. So.
It certainly, I think I used TurboTax or one of those, and they connected to Coinbase and
Mhm.
downloaded it and figured it out for me, and
Mhm.
I said, "Ouch." But then I did look at how much I made, and it's like, "Okay, sometimes you gotta pay money to make money." I'm okay with
Mhm.
that, right? I mean,
Mhm.
this was a little bit that turned into a lot, so, you kinda go, "Okay, that kinda makes sense. I don't have a problem doing it," and I paid it. It was a little painful, but I think it's like you said, it's still a little obscure, and I don't think the average person, especially for the person who's just dabbling a little bit. I think we had a lot of You inspired on this show a lot of my listeners to dabble some in it, including myself. And that's where it gets a little weird, just because you don't have enough to really have it make a difference, but you got
Yeah.
enough that you think should
Uh-huh.
probably report this, right? Type deal, especially now. So I think there's some.
I guess I don't know how much of it is just flack that it gets because of what it is. Like, I almost think like there's this undertone of like criminality around it because of, whatever, the media. And and so I'm sure there are other things that we do, Venmo, right? PayPal, whatever. And again, Nancy Pelosi wants your more than $600 to be taxed, obviously. And so, but I think that there's plenty of other stuff we do already that is not in that same arena, or is that in that is there's parallels that
Yeah.
I think that people focus on this a little bit. One, because it is easier to do it, to make money. It's easier to make money in it, and so then it's easier to not report. But then when you get down to the small amounts, there's lots of other things we do on day-to-day basis probably that are on par with that. So
Yeah, well, the whole gig economy has
yeah,
created a whole nightmare in
yeah.
reporting. It used to be pretty cut and dry for the
Yeah.
most part. I mean, I remember 25 years ago doing taxes, and it was pretty easy. I thought I used to do it on paper. I did it with like pencil and paper, right? Fold that thing up and mail it in. Remember those? Well, you don't, but those are the days. That I was in my military days, maybe just after. Um, it's gotten a lot more complex and a lot more complicated. And I think another thing we think both the gig economy and crypto has brought is such speed to change. Like, things are changing. You just think about some of the litigation, the changes, and what's happening with both Uber and Amazon and their
Mhm.
employment practices and the thing. And that stuff is changing so fast, where employment law used to take years or a decade, in a lot of cases for a lot of things to change. So just the speed at which things are changing. I do feel like Bitcoin's settled down to a routine though. Would you say at this point in time that it's fairly stable from a uh, economics? I don't know what the right word to use as perspective, but it feels pretty stable to me.
I think it's yeah, I think Bitcoin is. I think that the going to the question earlier about what to buy, I think there's a lot of drama that uh there a few years back there was the whole the big blocks and like there was quite a bit of a debate on mainly online in the community and Twitter where about how to should be out of that came like Bitcoin SV and Bitcoin Cash. There were a few forks, and I remember you and I talking about that a little bit back then. But since then, since there hasn't really been too much uh, argument in the community, and then so Bitcoin itself, I would agree with you, is quite boring right now. I think any the quote unquote drama or whatever people wanting to uh, I think has been in the world of like the board apes like NFT type stuff where it's there's a lot more hype there and you get kind of some celebrities and some personalities involved, Logan Paul or whoever buying NFTs and then getting wrecked or whatever the thing is, right? Like that's where all the media needs something, and Bitcoin is boring. That's where all the media coverage has been with Web3 and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Do you think? And you warned me in an email not to ask you about NFTs, which means I need to bring it up. But what's the difference in your opinion between NFTs, which are it's a wild west, crazy, weird pricing, nobody really knows. I mean, it's this like people know it's out there, but they don't really even know why they're doing what they're doing. And the way people felt about Bitcoin in maybe like 2012, 2013, where they were saying some of the same things then that I'm hearing some of the people say about NFTs now. What makes NFT different maybe than Bitcoin?
No, I was being literal. I
Yeah.
want to talk about this.
Yeah. I think it's a good question because I think a lot of people go, what are NFT? Like
Yeah.
what's going on with this thing?
So you'll hear the term. I mean, because it does it does there are some fundamental concepts that are associated with that, and so you hear the term like decentralized, right? That was the appeal of Bitcoin came about to fight against the banks and the bailouts, and so it was a decentralized bank where you could know that you own and control your own money. But people copied it, made their own versions of it, and made it different. Did things different with it technologically to make it their own thing. But they kept the terminology, right? So they kept this concept of like decentralized and um, encryption or whatever the things are, right? What so the problem with an NFT is that if the foundation that it sits on is faulty or susceptible to bad actors, your NFT is essentially worth nothing. So an NFT is essentially an asset of some sort. Typically, for now, a JPEG, but it could be other things. People are building some crazy stuff in that world. But for now, it's a picture that only you own. You own it, and nobody else owns it. And it's basically you have, we'll say, you have the version. You have it. It's in your. I can go. I don't know how simple we want to get here, but you have a wallet, and your wallet has a private key in it. That private key is related to, like on Solana, right? That private key is related to a certain transaction. So that transaction is related to a certain JPEG, a picture. And so now, because you have that private key and you're the only one that has a private key, you now own that picture. It gets into some other things about where you store that image or how that image is served up. And there's different ways to do that. But at the end of the day, you're owning a private key, and that private key is tied to a picture. That's an NFT. So you can't Nobody else can replicate your picture of a monkey or whatever it is, because you have, that's your wallet and that's your private key. That's what an NFT is, in a very simplistic way. And it's the same as saying I own, one Solana or 100 Solana, SOL, whatever. I own that because I have the private key. But at the end of the day, when Solana's blockchain is breaking down on a semi-regular basis, and you start to question, well, do they really know what they're doing? Like, who's making these decisions? Like, why is that breaking, but Bitcoin doesn't? Ultimately, part of the problem with, like, so what if hypothetically all the Solana developers or the people that were running that community and running and responsible for Solana, if they all just disappeared someday, what happens to all your SOL? You literally could be. That's not what
That
I.
was that was a good choice.
So,
That worked out really well. That was good. That was almost like you
so
planned it that way.
I did
Have
not.
you
No,
used
I
that in
did.
a keynote?
I did. I, I did not mean it that
Remember it. We won't tell anybody the next time you keynote and use that.
way. Yeah. So, that's the concern, or that's the problem, is that people are using Bitcoin terminology, Bitcoin concepts, but not. It doesn't have the same gravitas as Bitcoin actually does, because it's not truly decentralized, and your monkey picture could be worth zero, as has happened frequently over the
Mhm.
past couple of years here. So,
Mhm. Well, I mean, it could be worth 0 because nobody will buy it. I mean,
well,
even
that
though
too. Yeah.
you were crazy enough to pay whatever you paid for it,
Yes.
and I mean, those are actual market conditions, and then it
Yes.
could be worth 0 because blockchain doesn't work anymore. Which is a concern. I was, or in the early days, as I was talking to others about this, folks that have been in the market maybe a little bit longer than me. The concern was the benefit of decentralization and the drawbacks to decentralization, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it still depends on people, right? I mean, and it depends on people getting along and keeping things running. And right, I mean, there's still a element of trust. Bitcoin works because there's a lot of money involved in it, and so because of that, I think it holds people accountable. I think we've seen in some of these altcoins that come out, it's literally three guys or three
Right.
people. Let's put it that way: three people who have decided they're going to do this, they hype it up and then run. I mean,
Yeah.
how many slash and grabs have we seen
Yeah.
in this with these altcoins, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's just like any other Ponzi or any other scheme. It's just because the media has given it so much attention
Yeah,
that it,
yeah, yeah.
well, both sides, like the media gives it more attention because it's easy to pick on, but also because the media talks about it so much and says it's the next technology of the future type thing, then people are more willing to buy it because they kind of trust it, because the media is kind of giving it a little bit of a platform. So,
The US dollar is propped up on a phrase, the full faith and credit of the United States government, my faith and credit, right? Um, Bitcoin also is a faith in some regards because we're trusting a whole bunch of humans who we can't see, touch, influence, talk to in some cases, and we're trusting that they'll keep this thing running, right? I mean, it at some point, like you said, Bitcoin, if a whole bunch of people said, I'm out, I'm going to stop doing this. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's still a little bit of faith, right?
so this is where I would start to distinguish between crypto and Bitcoin. So if you are literally meaning Bitcoin, um, that's where, because what would, as far as like gaming out these scenarios, right? If the lights shut off and, we have no power, whatever
Mm,
other ramifications are of that, um, these Solana developers are, they're going to be more concerned with everything else they've got going on, taking
yeah.
care of their family, like robbing the guy next door to get his, food, that kind of thing. Like, they're going to be busy doing that kind of stuff, and they're not going to be developing on Solana anymore, right?
Right. Right.
Versus, and so then you have a lot of infrastructure required to get back up and running to get your Solana blockchain to be at a point where you're profitable again, or you get the price back up. The difference, I would say, is that Bitcoin require you say requires faith in people. I would say that as much as on this side of heaven, as much as we have trust in something, right? You're trusting that the algorithm will continue to be the algorithm it is in perpetuity. And so when the lights go off and you have your Bitcoin, yes, you won't have. So you get in, now you get into like just logistical things of like, how do you
Mhm.
do a transaction without power, without internet, right? But at the end of the day, when the lights come back on eventually, there's going to be a lot of uh, you you getting the Solana network and world back up and running. I think it's going to be a lot harder to convince people to refocus their efforts on that, because now you don't have all the apps that were built on it, right? Nobody cares about all that Silicon Valley type stuff. And I know I'm describing an extreme example.
Yeah.
Bitcoin,
Yeah.
because it has been focused on just being a sound money, will be just that sound money when that time comes.
Mhm.
And we didn't touch on Lightning Network yet, but I'm not comparing that to. I'm switching topics if we go to that. But that's where I would distinguish between Bitcoin and crypto. Is that I think when the lights go off, eventually when they come back on, Bitcoin will just be back there, back up and running, maybe even worth more the because of the market dynamics associated with the world falling apart, um, versus the crypto stuff, which I think
Yeah.
will have a lot more trouble coming back online.
I think it makes that scenario, by the way, makes total sense to me because there's people have more invested in it, so there's more likelihood they're going to bring these things back online because from a dollars and cents perspective, they're incented to do it that way, right? I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of, and this probably would never happen, but folks just lose interest in it. We get down the road and price drops. Let's just say we're at 19 and the thing bottoms out at $100, right? Or whatever. Probably wouldn't, but let's just say it does. And everybody kind of goes, well, that was a nice run. Like, and people begin to shut things physically. We don't lose power. People just begin to shut things down and stop. The blockchain only exists because people are doing things on it, right?
Yep.
Because there's enough nodes for it to actually work, right? So
Yep.
that's more of the scenario. A lot of these I've watched a lot of these altcoins die and they just
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
They're just like, well, we're done, we're shutting it off because there's not enough resources.
And if you remember, the going back to like what the Genesis block Satoshi Nakamoto wrote, was talking about the bailouts. So
Yeah.
I think there is in to your point a minute ago about the full faith and credit. There is there has been a segmentation, and you could say it happened in 1971 or whatever, right? Because you
Right.
lost the full faith and credit of the gold bugs.
Right. Gold
So that was
standard.
probably the last time we had like a principled money, right? So there was this money and there's some principles behind it. After that, it was all about bankers and subprime mortgages and fractional lending, stuff like that. And so everything kind of all the morality behind money fell apart or left it after that, after 1971. And so Bitcoin is a chance. So I think that's why it's hard for us to go back and think about principled money again. And the fact that people are not doing this, big banks will still exist, even in the scenario you just talked about. So losing interest, yeah, I definitely think that the community could shrink for sure. But you're not going to lose the interest of the people that hate the banks and hate the
Yeah.
system
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
has come
Yeah.
since 1971.
Well, I'm putting my faith in those people.
In the
Not
banks?
losing. No, no, no.
Oh,
In the
okay.
people who
Yes,
have the interest in Bitcoin, right? I
right.
mean, I am kind of saying, I'm believing, I'm using air quotes. I believe in the people who believe in Bitcoin enough to be able to support it from a both a hardware and a usage standpoint, right? I mean, if eventually if everybody just wrote it off, it'd go away, right?
I think this is very important. I think it's you aren't putting faith in people. You're not putting faith in
Mm.
um, anything other than what was put in place, what the code, truth in
Oh,
numbers.
sure,
Like you're
sure.
trusting the algorithm. everybody else could stop using it. I'm not saying your Bitcoin would be worth as much anymore,
Yeah.
but I'm saying
Right.
everybody
Right.
you can participate in the system, meaning you don't have to put your faith in all these, because that is the differentiator between the banks. You don't have to put your faith in all these other people being involved or mining, right? You can mine, you can look at the source code, you can make commits or make sorry, not make commit, make pull requests, stuff like that. Like you could get involved from that perspective. And at the end of the day, you can mine and you can hold your own Bitcoin, and you don't have to put
Yeah.
faith in
Yeah.
anybody else.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense. A couple questions.
Yeah.
John was asking, curious about your thoughts on El Salvador's move to Bitcoin, and we've had some. There's been there was another company, right, that Venezuela did this as well, or just
The
not maybe
the other
Bitcoin, but
so there's been the only other one that comes to mind right now that declared it a currency was the CAR, Central African Republic, I believe. In There have been some other movements in South America, but I think El Salvador and the Central African Republic are the only two that have actually declared it a currency. Um, so there, I believe there was another South American country that passed a bill talking about Bitcoin as an asset or something like that, but it was more along the lines of like, because they wanted to tax it. It wasn't like a positive, like, let's do this type thing.
yeah,
Um, El Salvador, I, um, I mean, it stinks that they kind of did that stuff into a bear market, and so the they're reaping the rewards and consequences of that.
hmm
I think if things were obviously on the upswing, that people would probably have a lot different perspective, and they'd probably they'd be sitting there chuckling rather than wincing. Um, and so I think that in the long run it will pay off for them. I mean, there's a risk that the part of the problem is that the perception is based on what they do versus what Bitcoin is, right? And so if they get cold feet and start selling Bitcoin, then everybody's, oh, it didn't work, it was failed, right? Like, so I hope that they have enough resources to make it through, and that they can keep the Bitcoin, and they watch the price go up in a couple of years, and then they can chuckle at all the other countries that didn't do it. But I think it'll also be a good example for other countries of what they should do. But then what will happen is people will see the price go up. Governments will decide, hey, this is a good idea. They'll buy in, and then it'll be another bear market by that point, right? Because the government just moves slowly, and so
right,
they're going to be in the
right,
same predicament. So,
yeah,
I mean, if people understood, and I don't even, I'm bad at this myself, right? Like, don't buy right now when it's $19,000 and ASICs are $3,000. Like, now is the time to buy, and then you get the upside later. And so that's a hard concept just for human nature.
yeah,
And so,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it is hard. I've gotten lucky a couple times with that where I've sold at a peak and I bought back in on the way down.
yeah,
And I try to use some discipline techniques to make sure I don't miss that. I don't try and peg a bottom. I buy into the bottom.
uh-huh,
Like it right, you just kind of buy until it's rebounding again, and then maybe you stop at that point, and or you just keep buying all the time, right? I mean, if you've got a disciplined approach to that, and you're doing some true dollar cost averaging, you just buy in both ways. That way you're not you're not trying to time the market. Just had this idea in the final couple minutes we got left with you, Edward. I got
yeah,
this idea: Bitcoin Day in Omaha. Bitcoin Day meaning you're putting together an event here in Omaha, talk about Bitcoin. It's gonna focus or be around the same time as Berkshire Hathaway
yep,
shareholder day, and there's a
yep,
reason for that. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. I think it's actually pretty hilarious. Um, maybe we should do. Listen. The listeners have been asking me to do a Home Gadget Geeks meetup in Omaha for a long time. Maybe we just plan it at the same time so folks can come out, be a part of Bitcoin Day. They can go to Berkshire Hathaway if they want. They could do a Home Gadget Geeks meetup. We could descend on the Safari bar, cigar bar, or
yeah,
hang out down at Havana and do a little meetup as well. Oh, sounds like a weekend for me. What are you hoping for if I were thinking about going to Bitcoin Day, Omaha in April, April 23rd? Is that the day? Did I get
No,
that right?
so there was a the prop there
Oh, 29th.
we yeah we no, we didn't announce
Oh,
until
okay.
Berk we had to wait till Berkshire announced.
Oh,
So
okay.
I believe it's May 6th now because
Okay.
they announced that they were May 6th this year.
Okay.
So so yeah, you're so what we get people from about 6 hours away, but you'll get people from farther than that coming to your thing probably. Berkshire, obviously, people come in from all over the world. The goal of having it in Omaha is to, and even the name of it, obviously, Bitcoin Day was a play on Berkshire Hathaway weekend. That we've got people who are interested. They're following the Oracle of Omaha for a certain reason, right? Like they trust and believe that he's going to make them money. He's going to make good decisions. Our idea would be that the concept would be like we talked about DCAing in or whatever the thing is, right? Like we think that after the Oracle's gone, that there's still ways to make money that are people perceive him, I think, as a safe investment, safe, steady, long term. These are all things that are associated with Warren Buffett, and no frills, pretty cut and dry. He shoots straight, and so I think those are all things that kind of also relate to Bitcoin. Of just invest your money now, give it 10, 20, 30 years, or leave the stocks to your kids, and it's a good safe bet, and I think that describes Bitcoin. So hopefully we'll draw some people who are in town who obviously we have to get the marketing and the targeted ads right, but like hopefully we'll draw some people that are in town for for Berkshire to come and learn about the future of sound money in Bitcoin.
What does Bitcoin Day typically look like if someone came out and was going to participate in that? Give me a general idea. Just kind of what does the day look like?
Yeah, so we start. You can show up whenever you want. We start at 8 o'clock, and then because it's just one day, so we're trying to pack in as much activity as possible, as much learning as possible. But basically, just have 1 hour every 1 hour. We've got speakers on a variety of subjects. So people will be talking about dollar cost averaging. People will be talking about security and privacy. People will be talking about Lightning Network, building and developing systems on Bitcoin. So we try to talk about the community, like the local community, kind of what's going on in the West. We try to talk about the legal and regulatory space that's going on now. It's going on at a federal level and state level from a legal and compliance and legislation. And I try to talk about building on Bitcoin, like I just mentioned. Then we talk about mining. If we wanted to go more in depth on mining, get some talk to some folks that are doing it really big that could offer you some advice to get started. We talk about mining, and then the last one is the privacy and security, like I mentioned, to make sure that you're taking the proper precautions with your Bitcoin. So
Okay. No, it sounds interesting. What like generally morning until the afternoon? What do you
yeah,
try
so
on?
we have a open bar. We got a happy hour at 4:30. So basically, go from 8 to 4:30 of speakers back to back.
Okay. Well, something to think about. It'd be fun,
Yeah,
fun to invite folks out to Omaha, be a part of Bitcoin
yeah,
Day, do a mini meetup of Home Gadget Geek listeners. You
yeah.
guys have many have been on this ride with us since since 2015 when we first talked about it. When I told folks you were coming, I've been telling folks you've been coming for the last couple weeks. They're like, yes. So we should probably have you back sooner than
Okay.
2 years because I think it took me 2 years to get you back on this time. We should probably think about let's stay in touch on this
All right,
Bitcoin
I
Day
like it.
and that there could be some things we could do there. Listen, I just want to tell the listeners it's really hard to get a hotel room in Omaha that weekend
Yeah.
because Berkshire Hathaway. So it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, there's some great stuff going on, but you're going to have to move fast and act early and book some things in. It's an expensive weekend to be in Omaha, so
Well, that's pretty
that's the
relative
drawback.
though, because that's if you go to some other
True,
places, it's
true.
like ridiculous. It's still
Yeah,
cheap compared to where you could
yeah,
find.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What
You're
but I think so they had COVID restrictions last year. And so I don't know what the recent attendance has been post COVID. I'm sure it'll probably pick back up as time goes on. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
This might be the year though, where it's kind of the first year fully back
yeah,
where everybody's feeling comfortable. And that could be go one of two ways. Everybody on the planet could try to be in Omaha this May, when they do that. Or it could still be kind of sketchy, and there would be availability in rooms and hotels maybe doing some discounting to make sure they're full
mhm,
during that time. That's certainly they're not going to want to miss out on some of the tourism that comes in
right,
over that weekend. Our Gallup event isn't until early June. I think we're like June 6th, 7th, and 8th or something like that this year, and downtown. And so far, so good. We're seeing some good response to it. We're seeing some
yeah,
early response of folks coming to Omaha. So we'll have to think about it. John said, it's in relation to tent or to hotels, a tent and gym job. No tents in my
mhm,
yard. We can find. There's lots of. If there's one thing Omaha has done well lately is build a lot of hotels, and there
yes.
are a ton of places to stay in
Mhm.
Omaha, right? So
And even Exarban is not, they probably book up for the weekend too, but I mean that's not too far if you can
yeah,
get a spot. So
yeah.
yeah, and Joseph said, I'm riding my crypto into the ground. So that's what I would say too, is like not Bitcoin, but the other cryptos, like take a flyer and gamble, and there's a chance it goes to zero, but it's still fun to do.
I'm basically down to Ethereum and Bitcoin. I just was
Mhm.
like, I'm good. I mean, I hold a few in some of the altcoins and some of the. We didn't even talk about the hard drive mining stuff that I've been doing,
Mhm.
and we hold a little bit in that. Some of them have done better than others, but yeah, no, it's great. Edward, thanks for coming on. I'm going to let you go and go be a dad,
All right.
and put your kids to bed. I'll wrap things up here, but we'll get you back on as we think about first of the year, and maybe shoot for this May date for a potential meetup.
That'd be great. All right. Thanks for having me.
All right, Edward, thanks a ton. We'll see you.
Bye.
Couple reminders on the way out. One ton of fun. Thanks, Edward, for coming out and being a part of that. I was just talking about what I have left. Sean's got some Bitcoin, Ethereum, and ADA, and I bet there is a variety of coins out there. Joe says he's still got a ton of sheep, and I did too, Joe. I think I had like 40 million of those things, or because they were worth almost nothing, right? And the kids, we bought those with the kids. I did one buy and it doubled, and then I sold them, and then I did another buy and it went to zero. So I think I lost everything I made. So you never know. I got to learn to not second buy, right? That's the thing that I always think I get lucky on that first buy and I'm like, oh, I'm a genius. And then that second buy always gets me. It's always the worst on that. So anyways, well, you've heard maybe the birth of the meetup that's I've been promising forever. Just haven't been able to pull it together. I'm gonna tell you, if we do it that weekend, there's no better time to be in Omaha. Let me just say it that way. Maybe do something on Friday night. Berkshire Hathaway takes up a lot of space here in town when they do this. When they come, it's like coming for the College World Series, which will have kicks off the next weekend, actually. So lots of things going on in Omaha that time. There's no better time to be in Omaha than May. So maybe we'll do that. You'll have to. I probably wouldn't get a block of room anywhere because it's hard to find those, but we'll give it a try. See how it goes. A couple reminders on the way out. A big thanks to our Patreon subscribers. You guys do it each and every month. Thanks for adding value back into what we do. And if you want to provide value, if you feel like I provide value in what we do here, you can join us for as little as $5 a month out there on Patreon. The average guy .tv/Patreon. John is saying we could do the meetup a day earlier. Yeah, we could start on that Friday, do it that Friday, and then leave Saturday open for Bitcoin Day, and Sunday would be do whatever you want. It's a very, very real possibility. Certainly, maybe some ways to partner with what they're doing on Bitcoin Day to do some additional things. I guess it depends on how many would come. Do some additional sessions that are more Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he'd want to split the topics or some of those kinds of things. I guess it depends on how many would come. So you can join us in our Discord group. I've been spending a lot of time over the last since we had Bob and Ryan on talking about this build. I did purchase an AMD 5600X processor, so that decision has been made. It's a Ryzen 5 5600X. That's what I'm going with right now. I'm working on a board. Put a bunch of questions in the chat and Discord about it, and we're kind of talking about what do I put this thing on, right? And we're doing that in Discord, theaverageguy.tv/Discord. Go to the hardware section, and we're chatting about it right now, and I'll pull a trigger on that. Been looking at video cards, GPUs. Gonna wait on the prices on those a little bit, but I think Bob and Ryan have me at a 3060, 3070, 3080 on the high end. I've been following the 4000 series 40s. For what I do, I need a minimum of a 40 or of a 3060 to do a VR. So, do I buy minimum to get in? I can always swap the card out. I mean, card prices are dropping, not increasing like they were. So, I've got I got I'm going to kind of wait and see where things go. I think I got a couple, 3-4 weeks. We'll probably go with a fractal design case. Memory is going to be a pretty easy decision. I'll put 64 gig in there, 230 gigs, 32 gig sticks. I got an M.2 to buy. That should be a fairly easy. Those are pretty commodity at this point. And I'll probably just put a 1 terabyte in there. Probably not put a lot of storage with it. It'll be primarily, although it might be nice to have, I don't know, maybe it'll be a 2 terabyte drive. So I've got some work to do there. I definitely, one of the things I'm going to do with the new build is all the other computers are going to get shut down, and I'm really going to go to, I have 2 Windows boxes running instead of the 5 that I have running right now. So we'll get them all consolidated onto one, and I should have enough horsepower to basically do what I do on one box. So since it won't be a production podcast box, I can kind of throw a lot of things at it, and then we'll start retiring stuff. But if you want to join us in Discord, theaverageguy.tv/Discord, get that done. Lots of hardware conversation if you want to help me with this. I think the goal is to have this thing bought and put together here towards the end of the year. And so I'll be, the processor comes in this weekend. I think this weekend or next. One of those two. They're a little bit behind on that. Got a board and some, we'll pick those things, but we're doing it through the Discord group. So if you want to jump in there. Christian was in there. Christian was in there earlier, giving me some advice. So, by the way, I think Christian's next week. Let's look at that really quick. I think he is coming on. Edward wasn't tonight. Man, I've got years and years and years of records to scroll through here. You'd think I'd have this up a little bit faster than that, and that is true. Christian will be here for 550 and halfway to 600, and so we'll be talking a lot of build stuff next week too. So come out and join us live if you want to talk about that build. And John, John's saying, what's the topic? Whatever Christian wants to talk about, but we'll definitely talk about some build stuff. He's got some opinions on that. So we'll dig into that. We'll dig into that too. Don't forget the AverageGuy.tv, powered by Maple Grove Partners. And that's Christian. Get what do you get with that? Secure, reliable, high-speed hosting with people that you know and trust. And of course, that's Christian. Plans still $10. So if you need some hosting, he'd be a great one. He'd be a great one to move stuff to if inflation has gotten you down and your hosting's gotten more expensive and you need something. I'm sure he can do anything. So check it out, maplegrovepartners.com, and he'd love to hear from you. Let him know that you listen to Home Gadget Geeks. If you've got a question, you want to leave a comment, go to homegadgetgeeks.com and leave a voicemail. There's a little button bottom right-hand corner to do that. I haven't checked it in a while. If you do that, send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv, and let me know that you've done that. So I go out and check it out. We'll play it right here on the show. You don't have to have great audio for that. You just have to have a question. Jump out there and get that done yet. Uncle Marv's asking, do we have a topic for our show yet? I'm hoping you've got a topic, Uncle Marv. Of course we have a topic. We'll figure one of those. We'll figure it out when we get there. So it's going to be pretty great. Uncle Marv's coming on 3 weeks from now. So he'll be back. Dave from Mac Geek Gab is coming on, and we got Thanksgiving. Jay and Fola are back. Jay from Franzi and Friends, he was on last week, and Fola is going to join us. We're just going to have a fun conversation next week or 2 weeks with Jay and Fola. Be tons of fun. Great stuff coming up, and appreciate you guys doing that. We are live. When I say doing that, I mean coming out and listening live or listening to the podcast. Hundreds of you still listen to the podcast, and I appreciate it. Thanks for doing that, especially if you've made it this far. If you made it this far in the podcast, you got to the end of the hour and you're like, man, has he run out of things to say? And the answer is yes, I have run out of things to say. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. We have I got a tree service coming out tomorrow. They're cutting down a few trees in our backyard. I'm excited to do something different and outside. Fall is in the air here in Nebraska, and excited to get that done. So we'll get this thing wrapped up over the weekend and pushed out, but it'll be a good weekend, at least here in Omaha, Nebraska, to be outside, dry, not a lot of rain, and fall is in the air. And so we'll just keep all fingers and toes intact as we're running chainsaws tomorrow. Thanks for coming out, listening tonight. We'll see you guys next week. And don't forget, Christian is here next week. So come out and join us live. With that, we'll say goodbye.